Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Your PMO's Value, How Will You Discover It? I really appreciate everyone joining in. We've got quite a bit of a quorum here, people joining in from all parts of the world, from Australia to San Francisco, and Romania and Caribbean, and India and Saudi Arabia in the middle. We've got a few folks from various countries and across the globe and different time zones. I really appreciate you waking up early and or making out time from your busy day to make it to our session this evening in Toronto. So it's really good to have you all here, and let's get the party started. I'm going to go ahead and tell a bit about myself, my journey, and then we can go ahead and turn the tables to you and talk about something a bit more interesting, you and why you are here. So, just a bit about myself. I'm originally from Pakistan, and after being born, bred, raised there, went and did my undergrad in the U.S. and then worked there for a bit before I moved to Toronto, Canada, which is where I am right now as well. And then from a career perspective, I have a background in computer science, but then started off as a developer and then merged into management technology consulting and then ultimately into the sphere of project and program management, and been in this area really for about a bit more than a decade or so. And as a program and a project manager, had the opportunity to work on many different kinds of projects, many different kinds of programs, and manage programs up to $23 million in budget, manage teams up to 50 people, and so working on high visibility initiatives with CTO and CFOs as key stakeholders of those initiatives. And then slowly after that, I got myself into setting up PMOs and did a few stints there, and I really realized that from that point onwards, it became very evident that while you have so many opportunities, so many options there for learning about project management, learning about getting your PMP designation or any other designation focused on the crux of project and program management, there isn't really much out there in terms of direct interaction and help for PMOs. There's a lot of do-it-for-you PMO consultants. You'll have a few blogs, books, podcasts, etc., but not so much of let me teach you how to do it. And so I got myself into PMO coaching. I've been had the opportunity to serve several clients on that side. People from Australia, from North America, from the UK, and ranging in terms of people, from PMO leaders who are, in the leadership role within one of the faster growing companies in North America, to people who started off as business analysts, decided to take control in their own hands, set up a PMO for themselves in the company, and then ultimately getting promoted to head of customer service and customer relations, and even aspiring PMO leaders who want people who are, either in the analyst role or the project management role, but want to get real hands-on experience to set up PMOs so that they can position themselves accordingly and get the top PMO role. I've had the pleasure of working with all of these folks. And then, I also write on the topic quite a bit and get published in around 6 odd publications. And then, in addition to having webinars like these, I also speak regularly at Project Management Institute's events as well. So, that's a bit about myself. And I'd really like to, turn it over a bit to you and see where where you're from. We talked a bit about where you're from, what the weather's like out there, but I'm really interested to understand what really brought you here. What's your background from a career perspective? What are your aspirations? Why are you interested in PMO? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually launch a poll, and I'd love to see your feedback on that in terms of learning about who this audience makeup is. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll right now. You should be able to see it on your screens now. I'll probably go ahead and uh, put this on for like around 60 seconds or so, the poll. It looks like none of you guys have voted yet, but now I'm getting some people who started to get into this. So, okay, perfect. We've got around 17% of the people who voted so far. Around 47%. Okay, we're almost there. Perfect. We're almost there. We've got around 82% of the people who voted so far. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and end the poll. Now we've got around 82% of the people who voted. And just to share with you what, who's in the audience with all of us, we've got, people who've got a mix of project management experience, a mix of the companies that they represent, and a mix of why they're here. So to give you guys a quick overview, we've got around 64% of the people who are really well versed in project management. They're pros in that, and then around 36% of the people have been dabbling for a bit. We've got a majority of you coming in from large organizations, around 71%, and then small organizations around 21%, and a really small chunk coming from medium-sized organizations. The mix-up of why you're here, why you're interested in PMOs is rather more interesting. We've got, most of the people here, around 43%, are actually setting up their PMOs or in the middle of setting up their PMOs or just about to set up the PMOs for the very first time. That's fantastic. Welcome, guys. We've got a few others who are going to be setting up, who provided the mandate for setting up a PMO and are very interested in understanding what their team should focus on. And then we've got also another chunk who are here just because they're aspiring to be PMO leaders and want to take a good learning from everyone. So that's fantastic. Really glad to have you here. And it's really, really important for me to understand what the mix is of the audience. It really, uh, uh, makes me feel good by understanding who I'm really speaking with. So thank you all for sharing that. Let's get on to it now. So this is a bit interesting, guys. The value, the word value, the term value, that's one of the most overused, most abused words that's out there. What do you guys think? In the chat, give me a quick note. What do you think? What do you think about that? Every time I heard the word value getting thrown around, if I earned $1 for that, it'd probably be a millionaire by now. Yep. We've got David who just joined us. Welcome. And David is right into it. Value seems to be subjective and means different things to different organizations. Yep. And then right up there with benefits capture. Yeah, benefits capture is right as well. I mean, that gets thrown around quite a bit as well. And specifically when it comes to like things within the work environment, the word value is extremely overused, and we're all guilty of that. Me too. I termed the word I included the word value in the topic of this webinar, right? I guess that's just to convey the point across, but it is right out there, totally overused, and whenever we mention that, whenever we say that, sometimes it becomes very difficult for us to back that up. And that's really what I want to address here. But, just before we do that, let's take a look at what value really means, right? And I guess it means different things to different people, as David pointed out. But let's look at what the Merriam-Webster dictionary has to say, right? And they've pointed out like 5 different items out there. I won't read through all of them, but it's really about, was a monetary worth or relative worth of something. But it's something, it has the word worth associated next to it. That means that's something that you should be able to measure either quantitatively or qualitatively. Now, when it comes to PMOs, for me, I just like to look at it another way. The way I look at the word value for PMOs is, why does the PMO exist, or why should it exist? And that's really the bottom line. And that's what I want to share with you and talk to you about. So really, why you guys are here is, how do you really want to discover the value of your PMOs? And I'd like to share with you my discovery funnel. Like the way you've got a sales funnel where you start off with one area and then finish out with sale. This takes you in from one area and then spits out ultimately what the value you should be focusing on, working towards for your PMO. It's got 7 stages: identifying stakeholders, preparing questionnaires, meet and queue, assess and ideate, determine metrics, solidify business case, and then monitor regularly. So let's go ahead and take a look at each area of the funnel. For each area, we'll talk about what it is, what I mean by it, why it's important, why should we be doing it, how it should be done, and then we'll share with you some examples where relevant for those specific items. So let's get into it. So for identifying stakeholders, what does that really mean? It means to identify all the roles or people that you are going to be working with within the organization or outside the organization. And that working relationship could be whether you're working with them, for them, or they are working into you or reporting into you. And the reason why this is so important is because you, again, going back to what my definition of value is, why do you exist? Why should the PMO exist? Why does the PMO exist? It's there so that it eradicates pain points, challenges of your key stakeholders, of all your stakeholders. And if you don't understand what their challenges and pain points are, then you really need to go ahead and start from scratch. Now, it's best to go ahead and get that information from the source directly. Sometimes, people just go about and say, oh, you know what? The guy who hired me to run the PMO, he told me we should be doing the PMO in this way. Or, you go about talking to people in the hallway and figuring things out. Or you just talk to the top guy, the CIO, the CEO, the CTO, whoever it is, and say, okay, whatever he or she thinks, that's what you end up doing. But the PMO serves more than one person. It serves the entire organization. And that includes and involves various elements to it. That's why it's important to understand and identify all the relevant stakeholders and working with them. So this means really understanding who asked for the PMO to be created, what are the different disciplines that the PMO should be focusing on or is expected to focus on. That could be an easy start. And then if you are in a bigger organization where you have multiple departments, where you have multiple geographies, understand if your PMO is at that point in time expected to work with different departments or different geographies. And then what are the roles within the PMO? So if you already have if you're, let's say, resurrecting a PMO or creating a PMO in an organization where there are already project managers and PMOs, analysts, in that point, you might already have a team that you can start off with. In smaller organizations, you might just be a PMO of one as you start. So it's just important to identify and articulate all of these different elements so that you can have a very crystal clear view of who your stakeholders could be. So example of stakeholders are, as I mentioned earlier, CIOs, project managers, PMO analysts, resource managers, if you're working with resource management, head of the geography, head of a department, etc. So that's step one, identifying all your stakeholders. The next step is preparing the questionnaire, right? So this is essentially just brainstorming all the relevant, pertinent questions that you have that would really dig into understanding what are some of the existing pain points that your stakeholders have. And it's also an opportunity for you to understand their perspectives on what the possible solutions could be. They may have some ideas that could work. They may have some perspectives that would help you understand and get a good, better idea of uh, adoption and easy buy-in for your PMO. So it's really good to take a stock of what they have in mind. And then ultimately, you also want to make sure that all the questions that you have, you're mapping them relevantly to the right stakeholders, right? So when you're speaking to the CIO, for example, then you want to talk a bit more on the high level. If you're talking to middle management, we'll talk about both mix between strategy and tactics. And if you're looking at at more junior level roles, then you want to get really down to tactics and figure out what are some of the things that you want to focus on. And now as you figure out the right it's as they say in when you're starting a company, it's not about what solution you're providing. The more important thing is which problem are you solving. And the same thing goes with the PMO. You really need to understand and identify questions that will dig in deep into figuring out what questions you want. What are some of the gaps that they're going to expose? And really get a conversation going with these stakeholders. And so it's also important that you have questions that are more open-ended versus a yes or no situation, right? Some of the examples that you could have could be for some of these questions are, how effective is the delivery of the projects? Or what are some of the biggest challenges that you're having for resource management? And I particularly like this open-ended question, which you're giving the power to the stakeholders is, if you had a magic wand, which problem would you like to go away, and why, and how? That really opens up a lot of can of worms, which is great at this stage. And you really want to go ahead and document them and get a good sense of what's going on. The third step, once you've understood what the questions are, map them out, is really just meet with all these stakeholders. It's a great opportunity for you to start meeting them, building a relationship with your stakeholders, and really giving them an opportunity to show, for you to tell them that you really care about solving their problems. That's why you're here. And that in itself is a huge opportunity for getting great buy-in. One thing that I always find in these stages is I can also differentiate between people who are really excited about getting a PMO, or who are sort of on the fence, and then also the naysayers. And then how I work with them, what are the strategies in terms of developing my relationships with them, that can all pan out based on the people who I'm interviewing with accordingly. And also it gives me a good sense of what are some of the roadblocks I can anticipate when I'm setting up the PMO. So I can either use the strategy of going around that right for a time being, or I can use a strategy of going right through it. So depending on the situation. And really this is just setting up calendar invites to everyone, ideally meeting them in person or a video chat like this, so that you can have a more in-person, or a feel of a more in-person conversation. You can get a good sense of the body language as well. And I think that can really help a long way. And then if you send these out in advance, that obviously helps as well. You want to make sure that when you're starting off these conversations, you're setting the context right, you're explaining to them why you're there, why you're meeting them. And one thing that I like to do in these situations is really meeting people in one-on-one situations versus in groups, because when you're in groups, oftentimes the most vocal people speak, and the other people in the room, other key stakeholders in the room, you really don't get to hear much from them. So I like to just have one-on-one time, make sure that people are able to get the spotlight, and you get all the information that you need. So some of the challenges that you might hear through these situations is people talking about we have a lot of projects but none of them get done, or we have requests for projects coming in left, right, and center, and we just do whichever one makes sense to us. People talk about resources getting overwhelmed. People talk about we know projects are going on but we don't know what's going on with them, and so on. So that's really some of the basic things that you can expect to hear from all your stakeholders. The next step is assessing and ideating, right? So after you've interviewed and met with all the stakeholders that you've identified that you want to meet, you want to take the responses, take a step back, and start analyzing them. So you analyze what you've heard, you also analyze what you've observed. Now, in terms of observations, you could sort of really make a good sense of whether an organization or the department is serious enough for a PMO, is mature enough for a PMO, is ready enough for a PMO. What kind of a PMO might best fit for in that situation, and that comes with experience. That comes with doing some secondary research. That comes with getting some insights or advice from people who've done it before. But really looking at some of these responses, understand any trends or patterns that you see, understand what's the frequency of some of the issues that come up, use that as a mechanism to prioritize things, and really the solutions to these challenges, or these challenges really are then ultimately the reason why your PMO should exist, right? If your projects aren't getting done, maybe that's the reason why your PMO should exist. But again, when you look at this collectively, you need to understand, do I really need a PMO for this? Or do I just need to have better project managers or more project managers for the projects to get done, right? So these are some of the things that you will understand holistically once you talk to everyone, or rather all different types of roles within the company that would essentially be a stakeholder for the PMO. Now, once within this stage, within the assessing and ideating stage, we're also now going to try to see how we will map these challenges to possible solutions that the PMO can offer. So for example, if none of your projects are getting done, maybe one of the reasons is because there's no schedule management standards and governance in place, and people are just, people are doing things in their own way. People who don't have prior project management experience are doing things in their own way. People who have prior project management experience are doing things the way they see fit, but not in a predictable, consistent, standard way. Another challenge that we talked about was, we're getting requests from all over the place, work requests from all over the place. Now, that one was, the idea for that is you probably don't have a work intake process. You don't have a prioritization process. That's something that the PMO can really help with, right? So this stage is where you're taking in all the feedback, all the responses, and putting your mind, your assessment, your experience, your research to work, and ultimately what the roles for the PMO should be. So once you have the roles of the PMO, then it comes to the interesting part, is determining the metrics for them, right? So with the assessment, you're understanding the why, the value, but to demonstrate that, it's one thing to know, it's one thing to tell, and it's another thing to measure and consistently report on, so that it's easily understandable for the people you're telling these things to. And metrics is a great way to do that, right? So you're essentially taking the responsibilities of the PMO and mapping them to quantitative and qualitative metrics, so that you understand, not only how the PMO is performing and being accepted and being valued, but also all the areas that the PMO is responsible for. How are they being measured? How are they working out? Are they doing things the right way or not? And the reason why this is important is because this helps you do this objectively, right? And it can also provide a benchmark or a measure for comparison, either to itself over a period of time or against industry standards, depending on what the preference is. Now, again, the way I approach this, and this is, I would say, a complete detailed topic of its own, but at a high level, the way I focus on metrics is I focus on looking at all the responsibilities and understanding, okay, what are all the metrics that I can use to measure these items. For each responsibility I could have multiple metrics, and I would just create a list of everything. Then I would understand, okay, if I have all these lists of metrics, this repository, which are the metrics that I can really measure today based on the availability of data? Because the data has to be accurate, easily accessible, and easily updatable. Because I don't want to go ahead and go through hoops getting data once and then having to go through that again and again and again. So based on that, I can go ahead and figure out what I can measure today. Now, once I've done that, I'll also take a look at the remaining metrics and see, okay, which were the ones that I can't measure today, but I should really be measuring because it makes a lot of sense. And I think these are good metrics for us to communicate the value of the PMO. Put them on our roadmap. Let's see how we can go ahead and get those done, how we can go ahead and get the data for them over a period of time. So give yourself a few months or weeks, whatever you have it, to go ahead and map that out. And then whatever the remaining metrics are, put them in the shelf, archive them, and get back to them at a later point in time, right? So some of the examples that you can consider for metrics, and again, depending on the needs and situation that you're in, one of the examples could be the number of process remediation activities. Now, this measures proactive process improvements that the PMO is doing in terms of the audits it's doing, and then what is that audit revealing? That's what this first metric is. Or the number of projects by its red, amber, green status, which obviously measures portfolio health. And then dollar spend versus dollar actuals, again, measures organizational health in terms of budget. And then increase in staff that is PMO certified or PMP certified, or CAPM certified, or any sort of project management or program management certification, shows towards your investment, towards your resources and their growth in this field. Percent spend by strategic category. So that measures the alignment with the right strategic initiatives. If your organization has 5 different strategic initiatives, you want to see what the spend is, percent is based on that, and is that the right chunk or not? That's something that really helps understand, making sure that you are prioritizing your initiatives in the direction that the company really wants you to go. The next one is percent of overall projects within PMO periphery. So that measures the influence of PMO, right? How are your projects just focused on, is your PMO just focused on projects that are strategic in nature, for instance, and you have no control over departmental projects? Is your PMO responsible for all projects within the organization? This is something that measures that. And a very qualitative question: are you happy with the use of and the services of your PMO? Right. So this is obviously just a subset of examples, but you really get the gist of where I'm going with. And this list can become pretty big pretty quickly, can become overwhelming, but the framework of making sure you're going with the availability of data first, and then creating a roadmap to set up the rest of the metrics accordingly, and setting expectations on what people can expect accordingly is the way to go ahead and tackle this question. The next step in our funnel is really solidifying the business case. So really all the work that you've done is all that pre-work, the hard work, the legwork that's been done to this point. All of that is used now to really just formalize what you've learned, what you've suggested, what you think should be measured, and getting a chance to share all of this back to your stakeholders, get their feedback and their approvals. At the same time, you're formally also accepting them. You formally also setting expectations with them. And also, this is another opportunity for you to share with them the chance for them to be involved in the setup and evolution for the PMO. As much as they understand and they realize that this PMO is for them and you're doing it for them, the higher the probability for them to buy into this is going to be, right? Now, in terms of business case templates, there are tons of business case templates out there. There are a few that I like as well. But if you already have any in the organization that is being used, just use that and put all the information in based on the format that's there. That business case, if it's been there for a while, the executives, the stakeholders, the management all understand it, all are familiar with it, all can expect how the format of the information conveyed in there is. No need to go ahead and start the wheel fresh. Just go ahead and use that and put everything in and get the approvals you need. And then the reporting and the regular monitoring of this, right? Again, as part of the business case, you want to go ahead and then you schedule, how often you're going to report on some of these metrics. Some of these things could be weekly, some of these things could be monthly, some of these things could be quarterly, right? So it's really up to you based on the metrics. You set that schedule and you convey that to the stakeholders so that they can expect when you hear back, when they'll hear back from you on some of these, right? And again, reporting is an art as much as it's a science. So make sure that you're categorizing them in relevant buckets. You're not just totally showing the numbers, but telling a story behind it as well. And then you're using, a good judgment in figuring out how to convey this information, whether it's in words, charts, tables, etc. So that's the final step of our discovery funnel. Again, identifying stakeholders, preparing questions, meeting and queue, assess and ideate, determining metrics, solidifying the business case, and finally, monitoring regularly. So wow, that was a bit of a mouthful, wasn't it? So how about this? I will take a breather, and in the meantime, why don't you guys tell me what you guys think of this funnel? Please use the chat option that we've got and tell me what you guys think. And I'd also be interested to see if, and specifically for a good chunk of you who are here because you're setting up the PMO for the first time or about to set up the PMO for the first time. Where are you with this? Are you doing this? Are you planning to do this? I just noticed that Garfield raised his hand. Garfield, if you can just ask your question in the chat screen, that would be great. Or if you have something to say in the chat screen, that would be fantastic. And then also people who are here because they have given the mandate for getting a PMO set up in their organization. Is this something that you guys are doing? Is this something that you guys are thinking about? What do you think this could be in terms of a suggestion for your team when you walk away from this webinar? So I am excited and keen to hear your thoughts and feedback on that. In the meantime, we've got a comment from Jessica. So Jessica says, a concern of mine is that my organization is very siloed. Part of my effort in setting up the PMO is determining the model. Which model do you think is appropriate to address this? When you say determining the model, Jessica, what do you mean? Do you mean a model of the PMO? Or do you just mean what you think you should do? Or what do you think the PMO should do? Okay, so again, Jessica, I think if your organization is siloed, you really want to understand who really wants this, right? And does it make sense to set up the PMO for the entire organization all at once? Maybe it makes sense to start off with one organization, one department, or a couple of departments that have shown some keenness to it. Another strategy could be to focus on not by a department, but by types of projects. So for example, maybe you start off with the PMO for just your strategic projects, and then in terms of operational or discretionary projects, you can leave them on the side for the time being. So this strategy allows you to A, get on with your mandate, B, demonstrate to the people who were sort of opposed to this as to how this is working out, and then slowly warming up to this idea. Okay, so that's great, Jessica. Great, fantastic. We've got Kunjal saying, I have been asked to add value to PMO portfolio, but with no authority. Yes, I mean, that's really an issue that a lot of us face, Kunjal, not just in PMOs, but also in terms of project management, right? Most of us go through this without having any direct authority on any resources. There's a lot of indirect authority, but not direct authority. Here, I think in this situation, Kunjal, my suggestion would be that if you if you already have a PMO and it's more very, let's say, administrative or tactical in nature, like I mentioned to Jessica, think about which are some of the strategic projects you can think about uh, for a department. So in your situation, I would perhaps focus on one department um, and just manage the strategic projects there and do that end-to-end resource management, work intake, overall portfolio view, all of that. In terms of authority, it might just be, you are providing recommendations and suggestions and not ordering, quote unquote, ordering people to to do anything, but you're coming up with recommendations and suggestions based on the data that you're seeing. And then that slowly gets people to understand the value that you're bringing, and then ultimately giving you authority along with that. Good ideas. I will use them. Thank you, Daniela. Jessica, I think your questions was answered about assigning the PMs, etc. I think that so Kunjal has a second part to the question. Do you think having an authority plays any role? Because I am finding it difficult. So it is important, Kunjal, that you have a backing of someone, that's you have some sort of sponsorship. It looks like to me that you may not even have any sponsorship um, to say, okay, you know what, Kunjal is our PMO, and he's going to be helping us out with something. Having indirect authority is fine. You don't necessarily have to have a direct authority, but I think it is extremely important that you need to have executive sponsorship. Without that, you can't do anything at this point in time. If you're finding it difficult, then the executive sponsorship has to be more vocal and involved in making sure that people understand what your role is. Right, so sometimes people may not even understand what the role you're playing is, and they may need to get some better clarification from your executive sponsor. David says, I have a similar challenge in that while our organization is not siloed, it's an IT PMO, but the resources belong to other legal entities, meaning that they have dotted lines responsibility. Yep, makes sense, David. Garfield says, the difficulty is to bring about the change needed for managing projects centrally when forever they have not. There is a loss of supposed power from major stakeholders, including unit heads, directors, etc. I'm not sure, Garfield, what you mean by that. Perhaps if you could help me by rephrasing that. Daniela goes on to say, the functions of PMO have to be according with their needs to add value in organization. Exactly right, Daniela. And that's really why you need to ask them and understand from them what the challenges and what their needs really are. So Kunjal is saying, I'm already focusing on one department. Kunjal, you may want to, again, as I mentioned, I think your question may have been answered. but you may just want to focus on making sure that the executive sponsor is then vocal. And I think if that is the case, if you're focusing on one department, I think your life will be much easier from that perspective. David says, secondarily, my company is big on KPIs but doesn't have a portfolio of meaningful ones to measure PMO value performance. Do you have a suggestion of on KPIs for this? Again, David, I do have suggestions, but it really has to go through the flow of what we spoke about in the funnel. Um, I can definitely share with you, like we had spoken earlier, about the roles and responsibilities of the PMO and mapping out the KPI specifically to them. And I can share with you some KPIs that will help you to maybe kickstart things. But to get a comprehensive list, you will have to follow through this process, which I think you are. All right. Garfield is saying, also having some difficulty operating a matrix reporting model. Functional managers don't want to let go. Yes, Garfield, that is a fantastic point, because that is quite the case. And I don't think that the functional managers need to relegate responsibilities of their people. You just need to have a better and a stronger resource management process in there, where they will commit, and where they will commit to providing their resources based on what you have discussed, and you have enough authority in the organization to hold them accountable for it if it doesn't happen, right? So if a project slips because someone told you they're going to give you 30% of their resource and they end up giving you only 10, your project slips. You can call that out as a risk. You can call out that functional manager, and the management team and the steering committee of your project or your program can make their decision accordingly. Karen says, as part of the assessment of implementing a PMO, is there a good comparisons of tools out there? Karen, are you talking about tools that are used for project and portfolio management, or resource management, or schedule management, or are you talking about any PMO assessment tool? So I'd love to hear that. Kunjal is saying, I don't have that kind of backup, no indirect authority as well. So Kunjal, you probably need to focus on getting an executive sponsor. If, let's say, I don't know which department you're focusing on, but if you are focusing, let's say, on the IT department, then the VP of IT or CTO or CIO, whoever the top role is, they need to understand your value and say that and get that and give you that sort of indirect authority, or indicate to your department that they are backing you up. Number two, if you aren't able to go directly to that top leader, go through your boss, right? I don't know who your boss is, but whoever your boss is, get them to back you on this. Without any executive sponsorship on this, even not having indirect, it won't help at all. So someone has to, you're there for a reason, you're expected to do something, someone is telling you to do it, they need to back you up. Karen is saying project management focused tools. Yes, Karen, I have a bit of a list, and in fact, I have an interesting deck on how to discover the right tools for your PMO as well. Happy to share that, and happy to share a list of tools that I have assessed, which you can use for your own judgment. I have a few questions in the Q&A section. I'll quickly look at that, and then we've got a bit more to go. Oh, I think we've got all the questions answered. Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Sure, Jessica, we can definitely go ahead and do that. All right. So I'm just gonna make a quick note of that. Tools. All right, guys. So let me ask you this. You know, these were fantastic discussions, fantastic observations, great questions, and some real challenges that we're seeing, right? So if you were to go about doing this tomorrow, about following this process, following the funnel, mastering it like a pro, so that you can go about truly determining the comprehensive value of your PMO, doing it methodically, doing it confidently, and presenting it in such a way where it's easy for your stakeholders to understand all of this. What do you think would help you for that? Again, in the chat, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think is gonna take you that will help you to master this funnel, to get the value out in the open and easily understandable by your stakeholders? Any thoughts? Any ideas? Great point from Jessica. Echoing what I shared earlier, ensuring executive sponsorship is key. Empowering your executives to advocate for you would be my first step. Great. What else? All right, as people are tapping it out, I'm going to go ahead and share with you some of my perspectives. So Naveen mentions the right roadmap and milestones. Great. Yep. Fantastic, Naveen. That's exactly right. I mean, I think the roadmap would change from people to people, from organization to organization, from PMO to PMO. But having a framework in which to create your roadmap, that's key. And having that will give you a really good head start. So yes, absolutely. Right. So I think in terms of my perspective is, if you want to take control, you got to take control in your own hands with here. Right. So Jessica, I know you talked about empowering your executives for being an advocate. That's key. Getting the executive sponsorship is key, but also making sure that you and the executive sponsors are aligned in terms of what you're really hearing and versus what they want. That's essential. And for that, you need to feel empowered yourself. You need to feel um, confident that what you've heard, you've got the right data, you've got the right information behind you to support all of that. And for me, I think obviously previous experiences help, but doing a lot of secondary research in this area, and doing a lot of self practice here helps as well, right? And you can definitely do that by seeking the right jobs that will help you learn on the job, making the effort to conscious practicely. But there are also books, blogs, and other publications out there that can help you. Now, this is a list of some of the, my favorite program management and PMO books as well. There's a course on Udemy as well. But, what I do feel that, when you start looking at all these books, um, doing some of this research, it takes a lot of time. And I also feel that it you may have to go about looking at various publications to really get all the information that you need. So what I've done is I've come up with a comprehensive way that will fast track all of this. And I call it, but before I tell you about that, I want to mention to you that just for coming in today, I will be sharing with you after the webinar is over the guide to identify your PMO stakeholders. So everything that I talked to you about in that step, about how to go about doing it, I've got that all in a comprehensive guide, which you have to just go through, follow through, and fill that in. And you've got all your PMO stakeholders identified. And from that point onwards, you just have to choose based on the needs, based on your understanding, who are the right people that you need to interview. So that's my thank you to you for coming in today. I know some of you guys are, as I mentioned earlier, taking out time from your busy day or waking up early to get here. I really appreciate that. In addition to that, what I want to do is introduce the discovery workshop with you, right? This is going to be an experiential learning activity and exercise, and it focuses really on the biggest PMO challenge. The number one challenge that PMOs face is not getting the right buy-in, right? And going through this process, the discovery funnel, going through understanding the right value for your organization, solving that is going to get you the biggest bang for a buck and position you and your PMO well for success. So who is this for? This is for first-time PMO leaders and sponsors, right? So either you're about to set up PMO or just in the midst of doing it, or it's for aspiring PMO leaders and sponsors as well. And if you've set up a PMO before, but would love to hear on the perspective, or just want to make sure, if you're revamping a PMO, or you just want to make sure that you have another way to demonstrate value, you're welcome for this as well. But also, more importantly, need people who are committed to learn, share, and grow themselves, and are willing to invest the time and effort and focus on this for their professional benefit, for their professional trajectory, and for the benefit of their PMO. Kunjalas, when is this workshop? Getting right to it, Kunjal. Just wanted to go ahead and tell you a bit about what it's going to cover first. So essentially, it's going to cover the entire discovery funnel that we talked about, right? I'm going to break it up into two parts. It's going to be in two different dates. The first part is, talks about the first half of the funnel, where we're identifying the stakeholders, preparing the questionnaires. We'll do role plays to obtain the answers, right? So we'll come up with a list of questions, and I'll share you a list of comprehensive questions as well. We'll do a role play in terms of the answers. We'll assess what the answers are telling us. We'll have a discussion based on different variations of scenarios, right? And then we'll end up that first part, and then kickstart the second part by looking at those answers and identifying the priorities, building out the PMO roadmap, finalizing the PMO metrics, the business case, and then what are the reporting structure that you're going to use, right? So it's going to be a hands-on, deep dive, group focused exercise focusing on the discovery funnel. And if there are any situations or scenarios where you are in the midst of actually setting up PMO, you want us to use one of yours, we're more than happy to do that, and we can get through this. Now, what will you get? Why should you consider this, right? Because there's simulated role play. You'll get experience and perspectives of not just one, but many people who are involved in that workshop. You're actually going to navigate through the funnel, right? So it's not just walking out away from this webinar, but just actually going through this as well intensely. You'll have the access to all the templates that we'll be using to give you the head start. So we'll use those templates for our exercises within the workshop, but then that's accessible to you for lifetime, and you can use that at your current PMO, your future PMO, etc. Positioning yourself for the top PMO role. So if you already are aspiring to be PMO leaders, this is going to give you some arms and arsenal to tell people, to showcase to them what you're going to do for them when you get hired. That's key, right? A lot of the times people just talk about what they've done in the past. A lot of these employers today want to understand what are you going to do for them when you join them. And this is going to be helpful for you. And then the confidence, that is unquantifiable in value. right? To be able to methodically do this, communicate this with all your stakeholders. And just so you understand, the templates that we'll get through this, the stakeholder identification guide, extensive examples of PMO questions, the roadmap template, metrics determination framework, examples of PMO metrics, and the business case template. You'll get all of that. And just these templates in themselves are over $1,500 in monetary value. Now to answer Kunjal's question, when are these workshops? The first part of this is on January 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern. The second part is on Feb 6th, which is also a Tuesday, starting at the same time. We'll have these workshops go live via video conferencing, just like we're doing this webinar. And you really have two options. You can sign up for both the workshops together and get a bit of a discount. Or if you like, you can just choose the first part, sign up for that. And if you feel that part 2 is something that you might be interested in, you can sign up as a follow-up. But you cannot just sign up for part 2. You have to sign up for part 1 first before signing up for part 2. It is a requisite. As far as the templates go, I'll be sharing the part 1 templates first during part 1, and then part 2 templates during part 2. That's how it's going to be. What does this investment look like? Besides your effort, time, and commitment, it's only $353 American dollars. And again, as I mentioned, the options that you've got, if you choose option 1, which is signing up for both the parts together on January 30th and January 6th, I believe. Oh, sorry, and February 6th, it's $299 for both parts combined. So that's a 15% discount. The other option is to just signing up for part 1, which is at $220. And then once you feel that you need to sign up you should and want to participate in part 2, you can sign up for that later at $133. So that will combine both options 2A and B will combine to the $353 amount. And then the option to sign up for the second part is only going to be available to the participants of part 1. Now, in order to go about signing up for this, all you're going to need to do is just go to this website, parvazcc.com/the-discovery-workshop, and fill out this form. This is all I need. As soon as you fill this form out, I will go ahead and send you all the details to make the payments. The payments will be done through Stripe, so that's a nice secure way. But I will send you all those Stripe payment details once you've shown your interest in signing up for this. So you can do that right now. I don't have to wait for the webinar to finish if you're interested. And if you have any questions before you sign up, feel free to do that as well. So that lets us to the end of the webinar. And I want to wish you all the best in your PMO success. And I want to thank you again for joining me today. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much.